Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up. You heard that correctly. I am going back to doing monthly wrap-ups. And I'm going back to this format for a number of reasons, and I'll give you a couple of them right now. The first reason being, I feel like I personally have not read as much as I have in previous years, and I think that part of that reason is because I don't have that like looming month-end deadline where I'm like, I have to finish this book by the end of this month so that I can include it in my wrap-up. So there's like less of a sense of urgency, which I know some people are probably like, but that's like a great feeling. But for me personally, I like to push myself, and I feel like I haven't had that drive. So I really wanted to switch back to monthly. And then also along with that sense of urgency, I feel like I haven't had the sense of urgency to film wrap-ups, which are such an integral part of my channel, because obviously that's why you guys are here, is to hear book reviews. And if I'm not reviewing books in a timely manner, that's bad. I really liked having that structure of knowing like, okay, this is the end of the month, so I'm gonna film a wrap-up that's going to be posted within the first week of the next month. So I like having that deadline. I just am a person that works better with deadlines when they are self-imposed. If I feel like someone else is putting pressure on me, then I'm like, nope, not gonna do it. Sorry. It's also just easier for me to stay more organized in a monthly manner because I can keep track by month instead of having to keep like a pile on my floor of like, okay, I have 5 books here to review, then I have another pile of 5 books, then I have another pile of 5 books, and I'll be able to keep the books on my shelves for longer, which will be nice, and there won't be like holes in my bookshelf when I'm filming videos. And lastly, and I would say most importantly, there have been so many videos that I have wanted to put out, and I feel like I haven't been able to do it because I've had such an influx of review videos. One thing that I really want to start doing is a series of like recommendations, because I realize that I almost never post recommendation videos, which is crazy because I read a lot and I have a lot of recommendations for people, and I really do want to start making like a series of those. I don't know if I'm going to do like one a month or something or whatever. I'm going to figure that out on my own, but I think that having the monthly wrap up will just give me the opportunity to make like a wider range of videos on my channel. Okay, but anyway, now I'll start reviewing the books that I actually read in September. So I ended up reading a total of 9 books, which is not bad, but I feel like the true test will be my October wrap-up. So the first thing that I read is Smoke and Shadow, which is an Avatar: The Last Airbender comic story. This is the 4th story arc, and this is the library edition, so it actually includes all 3 graphic novels that are within this story arc. I love these editions. I think they're so beautiful. But it is no secret that Zuko is my favorite character in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I really truly enjoyed this collection of stories because it took us back to the Fire Nation, and that is where my Zuko is. This story involved a mysterious prophecy where these ancient figures would kind of show up and steal children from their homes, and the reason that they were doing so is because they wanted to encourage citizens to dethrone the current Fire Lord. I'm obviously not trying to give away anything that happened in the Avatar: The Last Airbender show because it's awesome and I would hate to ruin any of that for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, so I'm trying to stay as like spoiler free as possible. But anyway, it's up to Team Avatar to try to solve the mystery and bring the missing children back to their parents. Like all of the previous arcs, the characters are just so true to themselves from the show. I think that is such a natural progression, and I really like being able to see what's going on with Team Avatar and like the whole gang ever since the events at the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I truly wish that they would animate some of these stories because they're so like brilliantly told, and they're honestly just as good, if not better, than some of the stories that we saw on the actual animated show. And I would have to say that Smoke and Shadow is actually my second favorite of all of the graphic novels that I have read so far in the Avatar world. Second, of course, to The Search, which is also a Zuko-centric story. I don't actually really give star ratings to graphic novels because I feel like it's challenging to rate the story and then rate the artwork, and if those don't line up, it's tough. I mean, this would be like 5 stars because I loved it so much, but it doesn't always, like, sometimes I don't like the art, but I like the story. So it's like, and I feel like a weighted average doesn't work. Anyway, that's like a topic for another video, but I really love this one. Definitely read these if you're a fan of the show. Next, I read Half a War by Joe Abercrombie. This is the 3rd and final book in the Shattered Sea trilogy. I read the first 2 books earlier on this year, and I had been putting off the conclusion because I just wasn't ready to say goodbye to these characters yet. The time came, and I have read it, and it is definitely one of my favorite series ever. So we've come a very long way from the events of the first book, and in this final 3rd book, we get the culmination exposition of everything that was building up to the face-off with the High King. So while we still get the perspectives of Yarvi, who was our main character in the first book, and Thorn, who was an added second perspective in the second book, we also get 3 new characters. The first one being Princess Scara, who is really the only one of the 3 that I just immediately took to. Yarvi has been my favorite throughout the series. Princess Scara, like, almost surpassed him in this book, but he still ended up maintaining the favorite spot for me. But she really did end up being like a major player in the story, and she threw a whole bunch of curveballs into the mix that would not have happened if she hadn't been there. I would say that this was a really phenomenal series ender. There were a ton of plot twists, just so much action that went on. My one and only gripe is that things happen like very, very quickly. So if you aren't paying full attention to what's going on, it's very easy to miss something because someone could die within like a sentence. Like I said, things just happen very quickly, and I would have liked to see Joe Abercrombie spend a little bit more time like explaining certain things or exploring some character feelings that were tied to certain events. But I do also think that part of the draw of this series is that it is a lot shorter than most epic fantasy. So if you're looking for like a really fun Game of Thrones, because that is what's going on in here. Everyone is plotting to like be the person in charge. It's really entertaining and it is really quick paced, but it won't take you years to read the whole series. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. Then I read Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I actually read this one on audio, and this was a reread for me. I really love this book. It is the first Neil Gaiman book that I ever read, and I'm so thankful that I did because it introduced me to like his plethora of work. Everything that he writes is so different, but still so very him, and he has been an author that I've just been fascinated by since I was really young. It follows a curious little girl named Coraline who is exploring her new flat in London while trying to not bother her parents, who are too busy adulting to pay any attention to her. She's very bored, and she discovers this door, and she ends up in an alternate universe where she meets her other mother who has buttons for eyes. Coraline ends up having to try to save her real parents and the world that she came from, along with a whole bunch of other children whose souls have been stolen. Plus there's a talking cat, and who doesn't love talking cats? There was original music that was written just for the audiobook, so that definitely added a new element to the experience of reading for me. It was kind of catchy. It was definitely like spooky and atmospheric, and I found that it was like stuck in my head a couple of times after I would be listening. And I actually think that I'm going to make Coraline a yearly Halloween reread for me, just because it's so quick, but it's so good. Like, it's just so well written. Everything is straight and to the point, and Coraline is an amazing heroine. And I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Check Please, #Hockey Volume 1 by Ngozi Ukazu, and I'm probably saying that incorrectly, so I'm very sorry about that. But this follows a young man named Biddy who has just entered into Samwell University, and he is going to be on their hockey team, and it's about him adjusting to college life in his freshman year. And he's also gay, but he's not out yet. It's just the cutest, sweetest story in the world. Biddy is a vlogger, and he's also obsessed with baking and making pies. He's so cute. His personality is like so irresistible. He's just seems like one of the nicest people ever, and I just wanted to give him a hug throughout this entire story. I really love the dynamic between him and his teammates. A lot of them are like the stereotypical like alpha male type characters, and just the way that their relationships changed and the way that he bonded with everybody throughout the year as he gets closer to them, and it's so cute. I know I keep saying that, but seriously, this story will just like warm your heart. The second half of the story is available online, so I can't decide if I'm gonna wait for the second volume to come out or if I'm just gonna read it online, but the ending was so wonderful. Like, I don't think that anyone could read this and not just smile. It was so freaking cute, and I keep saying that, but it's the truth. And again, I don't really rate graphic novels, but I really enjoyed this one. Next, I had another reread, and that was Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and I buddy read this with Holly from Holly Hearts Books, and I have to say that this was the first time that I actually successfully finished a buddy read, because I am a mood reader, so I pretty much suck at buddy reading. When I feel like I have deadlines from someone else, I just immediately am like, nope, don't want to do that. But I just love Name of the Wind so much, so it really worked out. And Holly and I, we were like, oh, we'll read it and then we'll talk about it at the end of the month. But it turned out that we ended up reading at almost exactly the same pace, which really worked out very well. So I would look forward to messages every day where we would kind of talk about what was going on. But I really need Holly to read the second one so that I can start shouting theories at her, because I have so many. As you can see, there's quite a bit of annotations that I made in this book. So for those who don't know, Name of the Wind is my favorite adult fantasy book of all time. I am so in love with with this book. So in love with this book. I loved it even more this time around, which I did not think was humanly possible, but apparently it was. I really think it's because having the knowledge from Wise Man's Fear, I just picked up on so many more things that just like went completely over my head the first time around. Patrick Rothfuss is a master when it comes to language, when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to poetry, and giving you all of these subtle and clever hints at things that are coming and things that are probably going to be tied together in certain ways. Seriously, there are so many theories. It just like, it blows my mind how amazing this is. And it also reminds me that despite like being upset that there's no third book yet, I really want him to take his time because there's just so much, like the story is so intricate and there's so much that needs to be wrapped up. It really needs to be done well. And I can't even imagine how much pressure that is for one person, but I've watched so many YouTube videos of him too, and he was saying how, you know, he started writing this book in the early 90s and it wasn't published until like 2007. He was working on this book for over 10 years. That's amazing. And then the second book was published, I want to say in 2012. So that was like 5 years later. So yeah, I think he needs the time for the third book. This book just resonates with me so deeply. I really enjoy Quoth's time at university. Again, I really just enjoy the way that Rothfuss plays with language. He is so masterful at his craft, and I am just completely in awe of the story that he's able to craft. So clearly this was 5 out of 5 stars. I've talked about this a bunch. I think everyone knows what it's about, but seriously go and read it. It's so good. Next, I read Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is a really unique young adult thriller novel. It is told partially through the perspective of Sadie, who is a missing girl, and then partially through the narrative of a podcast host named Wes McCrae. Sadie's kind of stand-in parental figure, Maybeth Foster, is the one that contacted West about doing this podcast and investigating into where Sadie has gone because, as she says, she cannot take another dead girl. So Sadie's younger sister ended up getting murdered, and then Sadie has kind of pledged to get vengeance against her sister's killer. She believes she knows who it is. You see her journey getting to this point, and you also see everybody else's perspectives who has crossed paths with her along the way. I have to say that this was honestly one of the best thrillers that I have ever read. I thought that it was so well done. I think Courtney Summers did an amazing job of implying the really challenging parts of the story that like no one really wants to read. Like a lot of the very gritty scenes were kind of fade to black, so there was that implication and like you knew what was coming, but she didn't have to go and spell it out for you, which made the story, I would say it's tough. So like it kind of made it easier to digest because you didn't have to see the violence against these young girls. But on the flip side, it also kind of made it worse because, you know, sometimes your imagination can be a lot worse than what happened. I like that she left so much up to the reader to have to like fill in their own blanks and to like piece together different things in the story. I think that she really trusted her reader. Sadie is a thriller that I have still been thinking about since I finished, and I think that that is just the mark of a really good book. I was not expecting to enjoy this the way that I did. I immediately went out when I finished and picked up a finished copy because I just needed to have one for my collection. It also speaks to Courtney Summers' writing ability that she was able to craft such an intricate story without exploiting the violent aspects of it. And I personally have gone back and forth on the ending like so many times depending on whether I'm feeling like a pessimist or an optimist. I have to say this was like near perfect for me, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Hocus Pocus and the all-new sequel. I can't remember the author because it's also really difficult to find. It's not like printed anywhere on the book or anything. Didn't love it. The first 40% of the book is just a novelization of the film, which I personally felt was very unnecessary. Like, why print this large book to have 40% of it be not the book that we are hoping to read, you know? I just didn't think it really added anything to include the original story in here. I think it should have just been the sequel. The one thing I did like was the chapter headers and the artwork. That was pretty. I enjoyed the sequel for nostalgia reasons. There were a ton of direct parallels between the all-new sequel and the original film version, so that was fun, and there were definitely like specific lines and stuff that I was looking for because, like, judging from the first couple of chapters, you could tell that it was going to really mirror the original story. I also appreciated that the story was updated to really reflect modern times, so we have a main character who has a crush on another girl, and 2 of the main characters are Black, back, and it's the three of them that are battling Sanderson sisters this time around. But honestly, despite all of that, it took me a lot longer to read than I had expected it to, especially after I got through the first chunk. I was like, okay, well, you know, now that I've reread the movie and now that I'm in the new story, I'll fly through this. And I just didn't. And I think that it's because I just really didn't like the writing. It was not very good in my opinion. It really put me off, and I wasn't ever very invested in any of the characters. It was definitely a fan fiction-y kind of story, but I still pushed through to the end because I wanted to see how everything would play out. And like I said, it was enjoyable for the nostalgia factor. But unfortunately, I only ended up giving it 2.75 stars. And then my final read in September was Listen to Your Heart by Casey West. This, I don't know why it took me so long to read because I really love Casey West's books, but this was her newest contemporary novel that just came out, I want to say back in May, and it's been so long since I've read a young adult contemporary novel. I wanted to give this one a shot because I love Casey West's writing. I've always found her stories to be entertaining, and it really just reminded me that sometimes I just want a cute, fluffy romance in my life. This book actually has a podcast element to it as well. We follow our main character named Kat, who joins this podcast class very reluctantly because her friend Alana pushes her into it, and then she ends up being chosen as one of the hosts of the show. Like Casey West's other books, along with the romance plotline, we also have a character who is being pushed outside of her comfort zone and going through their own character growth arc. So I always appreciate that it has those dual plot lines going on. I honestly flew through this book in a matter of hours. I really loved it. I always just eat Casey's books up like candy. They're just so compulsively readable to me. And throughout the story, we get to know Mr. Looking for Love, who is a caller into the podcast, and he's also Kate's best friend Alana's crush, and the two of them are plotting to get him to ask her to the fall festival. So 3 of the things that I liked most about this book were Kate's unconventional family, her obsession with her hometown of Lake Springs, and the rivalry she has with her classmate Frank Young, whose parents own the majority of businesses within her town, with the exception of the business that her parents own, but not because they haven't tried. I really enjoyed Casey's writing style, and her pacing is always on point for me. The only thing I will say is that the story is pretty predictable, but I read that because I know that, and that's what I want going into it. I am expecting a Casey West book, and I'm expecting a Casey West ending, and this one definitely delivered. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in September. I hope that you guys will like that I'm going back to a monthly format. I think it's going to be a lot easier for me, but I am sorry because that means that these videos will be quite a bit longer. But let me know if you've read anything that I mentioned. Let me know if you are planning on reading anything in this pile, and I will talk to you guys soon in a new video. Bye!